Boston Crab. This, for most of my grappling career, I have to confess, I've thought was just complete theater and I don't want to say nonsense, but like move that's really only done for entertainment. And the way that it's done in most of these old professional wrestling matches, I would still maintain that opinion. But after having grappled for most of my life, since I was like 14 and I'm 40 years old now, BJJ black belt, judo black belt, spent a lot of time wrestling, etc. Um, After I got my black belt, I've started experimenting with a lot of this stuff that previously I wrote off as pure like entertainment, borderline nonsense. And Boston Crab in particular, I've actually hit a number of times on advanced players, at least once on a black belt, and a handful of other times on like competitive blue belts and stuff, just to see if I could find realistic setups for it. And as it turns out, I have been able to actually hit it with resisting opponents. Now, the danger here is that it only superficially looks like a foot lock or even a double foot lock, but it's really a spinal lock. So it puts tremendous pressure on the spine. And with enough pressure, it can, in my opinion, break the spine, or at least introduce some kind of like fracture, or like it can definitely do some kind of devastating damage to the spine. And that's why it's so dangerous. The setups for it that I've been able to do don't look anything like these professional wrestling setups where they have a completely compliant partner who's just participating in entertainment for the crowd. But the setups that I have been able to pull off realistically end up looking a lot more like my setups for belly down ankle locks, as well as one or two setups that I actually found in an old judo textbook by a fellow named Kaiwashi, who's a French judoka. He's deep in the lineage of a lot of French judoka out there, and his setup was something that I could do a video for at another time on YouTube. And in fact, in one of my courses on Forbidden Judo leg locks, I actually did show the setup for this, and that's on Udemy currently. It may be on another platform later, but the setup. There's actually a few that I've been able to hit where this has suddenly transformed from a theatrical move to a realistic move. One of them is when I lace my own legs over my opponent's legs when he puts me in guard, and then I initiate that turn into a Boston Crab. And another one is just from the same setup that I would do for a belly down ankle lock transition, um, like from what modern BJJ guys would call an ashigarami setup. But instead of just keeping the one foot when I do my turnover, I actually grab the other foot and then I scooch myself down over his hip rather than keeping the same level of distance that I would have had for just a pure belly down ankle lock. So I've made granted, these were in recreational roles. They were not in a competition setting. And this is the kind of thing where if I had, there are people out there like Keen and Cornelius um, who put bounties on submission holds like this, where they're like, hey, if you can hit this in a legitimate competition, I'll give you $100. I'm not offering to do that, but I would certainly say I'm very curious to see what competitive situations people can actually pull this off. There's at least one example of an MMA fight, and I forget the name of the fighters, where a guy pulled off a Boston Crab, but you know, I have no idea what the grappling skill of the other guy was. I have no idea how tired he was. And also, there's been at least some bit of buzz and chatter that that may have been a fixed match. I can't speak to that, but it would, given the history of the Boston Crab, it would be very fitting if it was a fixed match, to be honest. And it's not beyond the realm of possibility that modern MMA fights are fixed, or at least some of them are. You would be silly to think that some of them are not. But um, in my own experimentations, I have found at least one or more setups for Boston Crab where I've been able to hit it on not only resisting opponents like brand new white belts, but competitive, like highly competitive, competes every week blue belts who are in much better shape than me, and then also at least once on another black belt, just when I was kind of horsing around a little bit. So, do I think that there is realistic potential for this? Yes. Do I think it's in the higher probability? Not necessarily. Do I think that there are much more higher probability moves that you can do that require less setup? Absolutely. Like belly down ankle locks, or even if heel hooks are allowed, of course, heel hooks are probably what most people would go for if they were in the position to do these sorts of moves. But it surprises me to say this after, more than half of my life spent on grappling mats, but I do think the Boston Crab is a realistic submission when you know how to work it. I just can't claim that it's super high percentage. So would I do it the way that Jim Londos does in this video? No. Is it conceivable that you can do it this way on a completely untrained opponent? Yes. But this is not going to be a submission that takes the world by storm. It'll never, in my opinion, it'll never be a high percentage submission. It does have realistic potential, but it takes a lot of work to get there.